أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد وقوله الحق المبين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ما كان لبشر أن يؤتيه الله الكتاب والحكم والنبوة ثم يقول للناس كونوا عبادا لي من دون الله ولكن كونوا ربانيين بما كنتم تعلمون الكتاب وبما كنتم تدرسون ولا يأمركم أن تتخذوا الملائكة والنبيين أربابا أيأمركم بالكفر بعد إذ أنتم مسلمون صدق الله العلي العظيم. My respected elders, my dearest brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I welcome you to this lecture that has been titled Dispelling the Darkness of Ghuluww with the Light of the Quran. I think at the outset, it would be appropriate to make some housekeeping announcements and some general recommendations. The first thing that I would recommend is that, as you can see from the title, these are going to be heavily Quran-based lectures. So I would suggest, if possible, that you keep the Quran in whatever format you're most comfortable with, whether it's a digital format or it's the old school regular format, whatever format is most convenient and accessible to you. Do keep the Quran with you so that you can refer to the verses that we mention throughout the course of our discourses and our discussion. It would be good to have the Quran with you. Also, if you can have some other books like Balagha, some of our good source books which are available in almost every library, that would also be helpful in future lectures. Tonight, since we are setting the foundation, I think we will be relying mainly on the Quran and books which I do not expect most people to have. And that brings me to the other point, which is that I don't know what you have been told about this series. Ultimately, the reason why we are giving this series is because of the extremely large number of questions that we are getting these days about the concept of Ghuluww, because this is a concept around which there are a lot of misunderstandings, misconceptions, misperceptions, variegated definitions. There is an intellectual, ideological sort of anarchy of sorts when it comes to Ghuluww. It's so many people having different kinds of conceptions of what Ghuluww is and what it isn't. And it's a lot of heated debates going about this, a lot of discussion. This is Ghuluww, this is not Ghuluww. So we want to go back to the sources and trace the development and origins of Ghuluww. Where does it all start from? Where does it all come from? And essentially, what is it all about? Where does it originate from? And is it something that we should be so concerned about? Is it something that we should devote time and attention to discussing? So I think the first point that I would like to state, which I feel is very important to highlight, I think it's kind of ironic. Ghuluww in the Arabic language means to exceed the limits. Tajawuzul had. Okay, so you have a limit of something. The moment you cross the limit, it's called Ghuluww. Crossing the limit, transgressing the bounds, exceeding the limits is what is called Ghuluww linguistically in the Arabic language. So for example, if you shoot an arrow that goes way beyond the target, let's say you exerted and applied a lot more energy than what was required to strike the target. In that case, it's said ghala sahmu. The arrow has become ghali because it was supposed to hit the target, but it flew past it. In economics, Arab economists would be very familiar with a term like ghala ul-thaman or ghala ul-as'ar. The exponential or exorbitant rise in prices. When prices go very high, it's called ghala. So You find people asking du'as among the du'as, even prophetic du'as, Allahumma inna na'udhu bika min az-zina wal-waba wal-ghala. So ghala, inflation is essentially of sorts. So anything that crosses the limits is ghuluw. Anything extreme. So ghuluw is a form of extremism, ideological extremism, extremism related to belief, extremism related to practice. All of these ideas and connotations come within the concept of ghuluw. But the interesting thing that I feel is worth pointing out is that when it comes to our average community members, our brothers and sisters in our communities, the irony about ghuluw is that most of the average common people tend to have a very extreme definition of, so their definition of ghuluw in itself is quite extreme. Their definition and understanding and conception of ghuluw itself is influenced by an extremist mindset. So your whole understanding of ghuluw in itself is extreme, which is ironic because ghuluw is all about extremism. So for a lot of lay people, average common people, their very definition of ghuluw is an example of ghuluw. They have very extreme and unbalanced definitions of ghuluw, which lack nuance and Quranic insight. What do I mean by that? Let me demonstrate that to you and illustrate that further. If you interview the average person in our communities, you ask him, what do you think of when you think of ghuluw? You do a word association test, okay? You ask them, what are the concepts and ideas that come to your mind when I say ghuluw or ghali or Ghulaat? What do you think of? Their mind immediately goes to ghuluw means considering, let's say, Imam Ali alayhi salam as God. So those who say Ali is Allah and Allah is Ali, or Allah manifested himself as Ali, yeah, that is ghuluw. So they associate ghuluw with the Nusayris, with the Ali Ilahis, and other such fringe groups and cults who explicitly attribute divinity to Imam Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. So this is what I mean when I say if you do a word association test on the average common person from our communities or from the average Muslims, you will see that they have a very extreme definition of ghuluw. This is the extreme definition that I'm talking about. When you reduce ghuluw to this idea that Imam Ali, if someone is explicitly saying that Imam Ali is God, then that is ghuluw. Anything less than this is not ghuluw. To qualify as a ghali, you need to explicitly state and declare that he is God. That is what would make you a ghali in the eyes of most people. But this is the common view, the view of the common lay person, the street level view, if you like. The scholarly view of ghuluw is very, very different. And this brings me to the other disclaimer. I don't know, though, a lot of you who have joined this group or who have joined this lecture, what is your background and why you have joined this? It's possible some of you might have joined it. You saw, you probably saw my name and you saw there's some kind of majlis or meeting that's going on and you're like, okay, so this is a majlis, let's attend majlis and gain sawab. So the sawab, inshallah, definitely will be there because we will be engaging in the dhikr of Allah and study of the Quran. But this is not a traditional lecture, if that's what you are after. Here, what we're trying to do is present to you stuff that is usually not presented from the minbar. This is stuff that is presented usually only in the highest and most advanced level lectures in the hawzat, in the specialist seminaries where they teach the Islamic sciences to a very high level. So a lot of the material that we will be sharing in these lectures is stuff that you'll be hearing, not all of you, but some of you at least, will be hearing for the very first time. Many of these views might come across to you as shocking. But at the end of the day, this is research, and there are evidences and proofs that you are not being asked to accept blindly. Rather, you have to critically analyze them, evaluate them, assess them, and then form your own judgment. We're not here to spoon feed anyone. We're not here to impose anything. Our job is to present research that normally is not accessible to people because it is not presented from the minbar for reasons that we can discuss some other time. But it is definitely recognized and acknowledged in the highest echelons of the traditional scholarship. There is talk about this. And all this stuff, that we're going to be discussing and presenting, all these evidences and materials are well known at the highest levels. Okay, so for example, the first scholarly view that I'm going to share with you regarding Ghuluww, to show you the contrast between the opinion of the street level opinion, the opinion of the common man, common person, and the opinion of the highest level scholars. So I want to start by giving you a statement that you probably would have never heard of from the Mimbar, and it would never be quoted from the Mimbar because it is too alarming. But it is a statement, it is there in the books, we have the books, we have the references, and we can, so Zoom allows for screen sharing, but I don't know if it allows for book sharing. It doesn't, I think. I think we'll have to have, yeah, in the future. So basically, this is a quick refresher series, and I want to make this into a kind of course, because we have a lot of ground to cover. And you know, while a lot of scholars like Ayatollah Syed Ali Hur Kamoonpuri and Syed Al-Haydari and Ayatollah Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi, Marja al-Najaf, they're very critical of the Hawza system, and they have written scathing critiques of the current Hawza system. But there are still, and while we recognize those criticisms to be true, there are some good things in the Hawza system as well, which I admire and I appreciate. And one of those is that they have this system that whenever you have a course, whenever you have a lecture series or anything, students, they take down meticulous notes and they record everything very carefully. I would encourage this practice here as well. So what happens is that when the instructor presents to you material, you listen to it, you write it down either during the lecture, or if the recordings will be made available after this, you can listen to, if you are not good at multitasking, you can just listen to the lecture right now and then later on listen to the video and make notes. And then submit your transcripts to the instructor so that he may check and see whether there are any communication gaps, whether anything has been misunderstood. So that way, this was actually, it's a method that goes way back to the time of the Imams. When the Imams realized that a lot of false teachings were being spread in their name, and a lot of erroneous ahadith were also being. So basically, the Imam says something, the companion hears something, and he transmits something else. So when this started happening, the Imams then started telling the followers, look, you write down, make notes, and then you present them to the Imam, or if you're studying under a companion of the Imam, you present them to the companion of the Imam. If you're studying under a student of the companion of the Imam, whoever you're studying under, you present your material to them so that they can check it and see whether you've properly understood what they're saying or not. If there are any mistakes, if there are any lacunae, any gaps, they can correct the same for you. So this is a good methodology that's followed very remarkably in the Hawzat, and I believe it's a good way to go. I would encourage our youths especially to make notes, transcripts, and then submit those to the admin or to the organizers. And then inshallah, we'll go through those. That will also help us understand as we keep, you know, gaining ground before we proceed to other more complex discussions, looking at the notes and looking at the transcripts and also looking at the kind of questions. So these transcripts that students make also often contain questions that they have, things they've not understood, or ruminations of sorts. Thinking, a student thinking to himself or herself, what does this mean and what are the implications of this? So this helps the instructor understand how much of what he's presenting has been understood, how well it's been internalized, and what, if any, problems exist at the level of understanding. So those were just housekeeping announcements. I want to proceed now and share with you the statement of Ayyatullah Sheikh Abdullah al-Muhaqqiq al-Mamkani. So because this is a name that's very, the scholarly circles would be very familiar with this name, but because lay people and common people, average people, non-specialists may not be very familiar with this name, I would like to say a few words by way of introduction. Okay, so who is Ayatullah Sheikh Abdullah Mamkani, whose view we are giving you to show you? Because for those of you who are asking the question, why should I be bothered by this series? You know, it's a series about dispelling Ghuluww with the light of Quran. Do we really need that? That's like shooting a house fly with a bazooka or a tank. Ghuluww is basically, the common understanding is Ghuluww means Ali is Allah, Allah is Ali, something like that. Ali is God. We don't believe Ali is God. Okay. So Ghuluww is, we are free from Ghuluww, alhamdulillah. And a lecture about dispelling the darkness of Ghuluww with the light of Quran seems like, shooting at a target that really isn't a very big threat. So I want to assure you that no, we wouldn't have chosen this topic. We wouldn't have agreed to speak about it if it was not a very significant threat to our community members, especially and particularly our youths, who are greatly being influenced by the rising tide of Ghuluww in its various manifestations. So let me start by sharing with you the scholarly view that will give you some insight into whether we are really as safe from this as we think or not. So Ayyatullah Abdullah Mamkani, for those of you who don't know him, is the author. He's a very high-level scholar, was a high-level scholar. He lived 90 years ago. And he is the teacher of some of the most prominent scholars, perhaps some of the scholars whose names you might have heard. So many of you may have heard of a very popular scholar from Qom by the name of, he was Najafi, but he lived and died in Qom. And he is Ayyatullah Sayyid Shihabuddin Marashi Najafi. So Ayyatullah Mamkani was the teacher of Ayyatullah Shihabuddin al-Marashi al-Najafi. And Ayyatullah Marashi Najafi is a very popular scholar, and he is highly revered, especially among the students of Qom and among the more religious, traditional kinds of Shia circles. He's a highly, highly revered, almost saintly personality among the traditional circles. So his teacher is Ayyatullah al-Mamkani. Ayyatullah Mamkani was a scholar who devoted many, many years of his life to an in-depth study, of Ilm al-Rijal. Okay? So he authored an encyclopedia entitled Tanqih al-Maqal fi Ilm al-Rijal in 39 volumes. Actually 40 if you count the indices as well. So yeah, can you imagine 40 volumes just on Ilm al-Rijal? This man devoted a very significant portion of his life to going really deep into Ilm al-Rijal, which is the science of the biographies. You study the biographies of the narrators and companions of the Imams, as well as the narrators who took from the companions of the Imams, and then their students and their students and their students, all the way up to the Muhaddithin who recorded the Hadith. So if you want to know whether you can rely on a narration or not, you have to know as much, you have to have as much information as you can have about the narrators. So Ayyatullah al-Mamkani devoted himself to this field. 40 volumes he has authored just as part of his series on Tanqih al-Maqal. Then he has another 7 extra volumes on as the Mustadrakat in Ilm al-Rijal. So basically he's a massively well-credentialed scholar, and he is a traditional scholar. So he's not even a reformist scholar, because as I told you, the reason why he has many students, okay, he was the teacher of many students, but the reason why I mentioned in particular, I mentioned Ayyatullah Sayyid Shihabuddin al-Marashi al-Najafi, is to give you a sense of what kind of students he produced, this Ayyatullah Abdullah al-Mamkani whom we are talking about. To give you a sense, for those of you who are not familiar with Ayyatullah Sayyid Marashi Najafi, and I crave your indulgence. Inshallah, this is a very long and in-depth topic. I'm going to proceed very slowly. I want concepts to be understood, and I don't want to rush through this series. We need to go very slowly, step by step, and I want to explain things to you, make context clear to you. So here I have with me a book entitled Qabasat min Hayati Sayyidina al-Ustad, Ayyatullah al-Uzma, Sayyid Shihabuddin al-Marashi al-Najafi. This is a biography of Sayyid Marashi al-Najafi. I shouldn't say biography, actually a more accurate word to describe it would be a hagiography. For those of you who are not familiar with the term hagiography, a hagiography is basically, it's a term that we've imported from Christianity. In Christianity, there's a long scholarly tradition of writing biographies of saints. And one of the things that you need to keep in mind when you're writing the biography of a saint is that you cannot be critical of them. A biography of a saint which only praises the saint does not highlight any negative aspects or even if it inadvertently does highlight a negative aspect, it ends up justifying that negative aspect. That is what you call a hagiography. It's different, very different from a critical biography. So for example, I have authored a critical biography of Ibn Abil Hadid. But because it's a critical biography, I had to mention both the positive aspects of this great Mu'tazilite scholar, and I also have to mention the negatives. Because it's a critical biography, I have to be objective. I cannot afford to be subjective. But when you have a hagiography is literally defined as a biography that treats its subject with undue reverence, or with a very high level of reverence. No criticism, only praise. That's what you call a hagiography. So Ayatullah Syed Adil al-Alawi, who was one of the prominent students of Syed Marashi al-Najafi, has written a hagiography of Ayatullah Marashi al-Najafi. And I'm mentioning all of these facts, record them and register them, because it will help you understand and get the context of what I'm going to share. I can't quote this whole book to you, right? I'm going to share with you one paragraph, so I'm sharing with you as much information as I can to give you context, so that you're able to fill in the rest of the blanks yourself accurately. So in this hagiography, he has this chapter. Ayatullah Syed Adil al-Alawi, who's himself a very popular scholar in Qom, he writes about his teacher Ayatullah Marashi Najafi. The chapter is entitled Hubbul Husayni alayhi salam ajannani. The love of Al-Hussein alayhi salam has made me majnoon, has made me crazy. I'm sure you must be familiar with the mantra that says, Ana majnoon al-Hussein. Yeah, I'm crazy in his love. Yeah, this is basically, and then he puts a footnote and he explains the meaning of the statement, because he has titled the whole chapter after this. Hubbul Husayni alayhi salami ajannani. The love of Al-Hussein has made me crazy. This is the chapter in the hagiography of Ayatullah al-Marashi al-Najafi, in which he's talking to you, he's explaining to you the devotion, the high level of devotion Ayatullah Sayyid Shihabuddin al-Marashi al-Najafi had for Imam al-Hussein. So he says, explaining the statement, he says, this is a mashhur maqula, it's a very famous statement, Hubbul Husayni ajannani, the love of Hussein has made me crazy, which has been popularized, and it is attributed to Abis al-Shakiri, Abis ibn Shabib, the Shaheed who was martyred with Imam al-Hussein in Karbala, who was among the Ansar of Sayyid al-Shuhada on the day of Ashura. It is claimed in some of the narrations that he threw his armor. When fighting the enemy, he threw away his armor. So the army of Yazid said to him that, are you crazy? Why have you thrown your armor? So he said, Hubbul Husayni ajannani. The love of Al-Hussein has made me crazy, so I've thrown away my armor. So then Ayatullah Syed Adil al-Alawi comments on this. He says, وَهَذَا الْمَعْنَى الْعِشْقُ الْحُسَيْنِي. He says this meaning, that is ishq for Al-Hussein, يتجلى في كل محب مخلص لأهل البيت. This love, this ishq, this uncontrollable love for Al-Hussein exhibits itself, it manifests itself in every sincere lover of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, لا سيما في شهري محرم وصفر, especially in the months of Muharram and Safar. Now he shows you an example of how this junoon for Aba Abdullah al-Hussein manifested itself in the life of Ayatullah Sayyid Shihabuddin al-Marashi al-Najafi, who is the student of whom? Ayatullah al-Mamkani, whose statement we're going to quote. So then he mentions about Ayatullah al-Marashi al-Najafi. Listen to this carefully. This is his student, Sayyid Adil al-Alawi. This is his first-hand testimony. Yani he's narrating bila wasita. He's not narrating through an intermediary. So and so told me, and I heard. No, he's saying this is what I witnessed with my eyes. أذكر في غروب يوم عاشوراء في أواخر حياته. He says, I remember that on the Maghrib, on the eve, or rather at the time of sunset, on the day of Ashura, في أواخر حياته, towards the end of his life, the end of Sayyid Marashi and Najafi's life. So this is not an incident from his youth that you can say, oh, Jawani jo Josh hato. No, this is towards the end of his life. He says, جاء إلى صحن السيدة المعصومة عليه السلام لصلاة الجماعة. Ayatullah Sayyid Shihabuddin al-Marashi used to live in Qom. Towards the end of his life, he used to lead the salah in the shrine, near the shrine of Bibi Ma'sume of Qom, Fatima al-Ma'suma, who is buried in Qom. So he used to lead Salatul Jama'ah there. On the day of Ashura, at the time of Maghrib, he comes into the Sahan, the courtyard of the mausoleum and the shrine of Sayyidah Ma'asuma alayha salam for Salatul Jama'ah. وكانت المواكب الحسينية لا زالت مستمرة. The mawakib, you know, when you go for ziyarat, you see the mawakib, right? The mawakib were still in full swing. ولا زال الناس يلطمون على الرؤوس, and the people were still hitting themselves on their heads, والصدور, and on their chests. ويضربون الزنجيل, they were hitting themselves على الظهور, they were hitting their backs with the chains, right, with the zanjir. So basically, the Azah was in full swing. وَقَدْ عَلَى نَحِيبُهُمْ وَبُكَاؤُهُمْ, and the sound of their crying and wailing was really high pitch. وَلَمَّا أَقَامَ الْمُكَبِّرُ لِلصَّلَاةِ طَلَبَ مِنَ الْجَمْهُورِ الْهُدُوءِ. When the time for the mukabbir, the muazzin, the one who gives the adhan, because it's Maghrib time now, right? Sunset. So when the time of sunset came, when the time for salah, you know, when enough time had passed, you know, the ihtiyati precautionary time had passed, and it was now time to give the adhan, the mukabbir addressed the audience. He addressed the crowd. طَلَبَ مِنَ الْجَمْهُورِ الْهُدُوءِ. He asked them to take the volume down, to quiet down. بِمِقْدَارِ صَلَاةِ الْجَمَاعَةِ. So this muazzin, Bicharo, he was trying to tell the people that at least as long as we're going to have Salatul Jama'ah, for the duration of Salatul Jama'ah, you know, lower the volume. What I find surprising about this is that he does not tell them that, he doesn't tell them to stop. He just tells them to lower his volume. I guess he knew whom he was addressing. So he didn't ask them for too much. He didn't ask them to stop what they were doing. Just as long as, you know, as much time as we need for Salatul Jama'ah, keep your voices low. مَا إِن سَمِعَ الْأُسْتَاذُ مِنْهُ ذَلِكَ. Now, this is the part that you need to listen carefully. This book I read for the first time when I was 15. I still have the annotation that I wrote at the age of 15, because you see, we grew up in Dar es Salaam in the Khoja community, where we had been hearing very different things from the mimbar. So most of the Maulanas whose majalis we heard, they presented us a very clear idea of that when it's time for salah, you leave everything, you leave azad, whatever you are in. Salah is wajib, okay? It is fard. Everything else is either mustahab or, you know, secondary. So whenever it's time for salah, you leave everything and go for salah. Everything is secondary, including even if you're involved in any rituals that have to do with azah, put them aside. Why? The example that they used to give, famous example, is Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam's seerah, his own example. In Karbala, he stopped fighting, he stopped the battle, and he offered salah with his companions. Imam Ali alayhi salam in the battle of Siffin, he stopped fighting, offered salah. People objected. He said, what else am I fighting for? I'm fighting for salah. I'm fighting to establish and defend and protect the principles of Islam. So obviously I grew up in this environment, and that's why when I read this incident, I still have the notes that I wrote at the age of 15. I wrote Hikaya Muthira Lid-Dahsha. I said, here we have an incident that is Muthira Lid-Dahsha. Dahsha means shock, surprise. So I found this story very shocking because it's very different to what I was accustomed to. He says, as soon as the mukabbir requested the people to quiet him down, to you know, lower their voices so that he could give the adhan and Salatul Jama'ah could be established, مَا إِن سَمِعَ الْأُسْتَاذُ مِنْهُ ذَلِكَ. As soon as the ustad, as soon as the teacher, Sayyid Marashi and Najafi heard this, what did he do? وَكُنْتُ بِجَنْبِهِ. He says, Sayyid Adil al-Alawi, the student says, I was right beside him when this happened. وَكُنْتُ بِجَنْبِهِ إِلَّا وَحْمَرَّ وَجْهُهُ غَضَبًا. As soon as he heard the mukabbir say this to the people, his face, whose face? Ayyatullah Sayyid Shihabuddin al-Marashi al-Najafi. His face reddened, it turned red with anger. غضبًا, out of anger and fury. ناهيًا al-mukabbir. And he rebuked and restrained the mukabbir amma qal, against what he had said. فَزَجَرَهُ قَائِلًا. And he rebuked him and reprimanded him. He chided him, he scolded him. قَائِلًا, saying in the Persian language, because it was qum, sakit bash, agar in azadari nabud, namaz jama'at nabud. He said to him, sakit bash. Syed al-Marashi is telling the mukabbir, shut up, keep quiet. The mukabbir is telling the people, you keep quiet. Syed Marashi is telling him, you keep quiet, you shut up. Agar in azadari nabud, namaz jama'at nabud. If it had not been for this azadari, there would be no namaz jama'at. So what are you asking them to keep quiet for salah and for namaz jama'at? Namaz jama'at would not exist if it had not been for this azadari. And as if this statement was not clear enough, somehow Ayyatullah Sayyid Adil al-Alawi, he gives additional commentary, although it's a very clear statement, but somehow he feels the need to explain it so that there shouldn't be any confusion, because most people would be shocked when they read something like this. So it's like, no, you heard him right. What he's trying to say, that's why he adds, he says, A in Arabic means, yani, A uskut. So he translates the Persian, because this biography is in Arabic, so he translates the Persian statement of Ayyatullah Marashi Najafi into Arabic for the Arabic readers. He says basically the statement that he said in Farsi, the translation in Arabic is uskut lawla hadhihi al-mawaqib lama kanat salatul jama'ah. That shut up, if it had not been for these mawaqib, this azah and all of this, activity that you see going on, there would be no salatul jama'ah. Ya'ni, and then again he offers commentary. Ya'ni means, he means to say, Sayyid Adil al-Alawi, the student is saying, that the teacher meant to say, يعني دعهم يقيمون العزاء على سيد الشهداء. Leave them to continue, observing and expressing azaa over Sayyid al-Shuhada. فلولا هذه المراسم وهذه المآتم. Because if it had not been for these rituals, and if it had not been for these mourning sessions, لأنكر أعداؤنا علينا قصة عاشوراء. This is his justification. Our enemies would have rejected and denied the story of Ashura, وَظُلْمَ يَزِيدٍ وَأَتْبَاعَهُ, and the zulm of Yazid and his followers, لَعَنَهُمُ اللَّهُ, may Allah remove His mercy from them. كَمَا أَنْكَرَ بَعْضُهُمْ قِصَّةَ الْغَدِيرِ, just as some of them rejected the incident of Ghadir. So this is the stance of Ayatollah Sayyid Shihabuddin Marashi al-Najafi, that he, according to his student, unless someone brings proof that Ayatollah Sayyid Adil al-Alawi is lying, which is highly unlikely given that he is one of his most trusted students. But anyways, we always go by evidence. If someone can bring evidence proving that this narration is false, then that can be examined. But this book was published way back, even before I was born, and so far no one has rebutted this claim. So it remains established. In any case, what do you see here? You can form your opinion about Ayyatullah al-Marashi al-Najafi from this incident. Does he appear to you to be a scholar who is reformist or someone who is very highly traditional? I think all of you will agree with me that Ayyatullah Sayyid Shihabuddin Marashi Najafi is a very traditional scholar. Okay, he's not a reformist scholar. Now his teacher, Ayyatullah Sheikh Abdullah al-Mamkani, he has similar views. So I'm mentioning all of this so that when I quote to you the statements, usually when you share statements like this with the public, you elicit different kinds of reactions, which I will discuss. But first, let us share with you the statement of this Ayatullah's teacher, Ayatullah Sheikh Abdullah al-Mamkani. This is a statement that he has made in volume 3 of his 39 or rather 40 volume encyclopedia of Ilm al-Rijaal, entitled Tanqih al-Maqal fi Ilm al-Rijal. Okay? And remember, this is Ayatullah Sheikh Abdullah al-Mamkani, who is a very traditional scholar. He has been praised by the entire body of traditional scholarship. So, for example, Ayatullah Sistani's teacher, Ayatullah Sheikh Buzurg al-Tahrani, in his book Al-Dhari'ah, he lavishes high praise on Ayatullah Sheikh Abdullah al-Mamkani. So the teacher of Syed Seetani is full of praises for Ayatullah al-Mamkani. I'm mentioning all of this because people don't know al-Mamkani. And when you don't know someone and you hear a statement from that person that is rather shocking, or it goes against what you know to be true or what you've been accustomed to, then you start doubting the person, or you start wondering, who is this person who is making a statement like this? So that's why I'm sharing all this background. In any case, we can go into more of his background and more stuff about him if you're interested. But for now, I think I'll suffice with this much. Ayyatullah Mamkani, in his 1439 volume encyclopedia, in volume 3 of this encyclopedia, he has this whole volume, a set of volumes devoted to what he calls Al-Fawaid al-Rijaliyah. Al-Fawaid is part of this really old tradition of scholarship in the Eastern tradition of scholarship. What scholars used to do is that when they write books, they have chapters, they have sections, they have different divisions, okay? And then in a large book, you usually have one section that's called Fawaid, which is plural of Fa'ida. Fa'ida means something of profit, something of benefit, like in Urdu, you know, Fa'ida. Even in Kiswahili, they say Fa'ida, right? Yeah. So Fa'ida means profit. In a scholarly book, when you come across the term Fawaid, basically what the scholar is trying to tell you in the Fawaid section is that I have discussed so many things in this book and I've done so much research on this topic. In the Fawaid section, I'm going to share with you in very brief and terse sentences the results of multiple years of research, the fruits of my research, the Fawaid, the benefits, you know, the big things that I've learned from my research, the big results that have come out of my research. They share these things under the heading of Fawaid. So Abdullah Mamkani, after spending a lifetime of scholarship in Ilm al-Rijal, he has this entire series of volumes entitled Al-Fawaid al-Rijaliyah, okay? And in these Fawaid, in volume 3, he mentions this statement. So this now is the scholarly view. You've heard the common view. The common view is Ghuluww means you say Imam Ali is God or God is Imam Ali. That is Ghuluww. Now we come to the scholarly view. Ayatullah Sheikh Abdullah Mamkani begs to differ. He says no. He says وَقَدْ بَيَّنَّا مِرَارًا عَدِيدًا. These are his exact words. وَقَدْ بَيَّنَّا مِرَارًا عَدِيدًا. Okay, this is something that we have made and explained clearly time and again. It's not something I'm saying in this book, and he's right. If you check the multi-volume encyclopedia, Tanqih al-Maqal, he has repeated the statement throughout. Okay, so what is the statement? The statement is, he mentions it in volume 3, but I'll quote that statement to you afterwards. Volume 2 statement is more important. In volume 2 statement, he says, وَأَنَّ أَكْثَرَ, listen to this carefully, وَأَنَّ أَكْثَرَ مَا يُعَدُّ الْيَوْمَ مِنْ ضَرُورِيَّاتِ الْمَذْهَبِ في أوصاف الأئمة عليهم السلام كان القول به معدودا في العهد السابق من الغلو والارتفاع. He says, and I quote, indeed, majority of what is considered to be among the core, non-negotiable, foundational beliefs of the Shia madhab, the daruriyat al-madhab, the necessities of the madhab, today, particularly in relation to the attributes and descriptions of the Imams alayhim salatu wasalam, was considered in the earlier period to be Ghuluww, to be deviant ideological extremism, and Irtifaa, heretical exaggeration. So this is a big bombshell he has dropped on us. And everyone with this statement has to, I forgot to tell you guys to fasten your seatbelts. Although in this flight, I don't think I need to tell you that because mashallah, most of you are very enlightened people. But yeah, for the first time you read a statement like this, this is the teacher of whom? The teacher of Ayyatullah Shihabuddin Marashi al-Najafi. And Ayyatullah Marashi Najafi always refers to him in his books. He says, Shaykhi wa Ustadi. He's my Sheikh and my teacher. He's my guru. He's my mentor. So Ayyatullah Marashi Najafi would not, because usually when you present this statement, sometimes even people who are not familiar with research, who are not well read, they listen to a statement like this and they say, what? Sheikh Abdullah Mamkani, who is this nobody? He is actually accusing us, and he's saying that our madhab, majority of the core beliefs we have about Imams. See, he's not saying the whole madhab. The Shia madhab believes in Tawheed. Was that also considered Ghuluww in the past? He's saying, no. Fi awsaf al-a'imma. Mark his words. He's saying, I'm not saying all beliefs of the Shia. No. Just the beliefs of the Shia about the Imams. So he's talking about imamology. In academic circles, we call this imamology. The beliefs that people have about Imams. So he's saying those beliefs that people have about Imams the beliefs that people have today, which they consider to be a core, non-negotiable, fundamental part of the Shia madhab. So much so that if you challenge that belief, people will say, oh, you're not Shia, you can't be Shia. If you're challenging this belief, if you have doubts about this Shia belief, then sorry, you can call yourself anything else, you cannot call yourself Shia. He's saying, yes, I'm talking about these beliefs, about the Imams, fi awsafil a'imma. In one area only, he's saying the Shia beliefs about the awsaf, the attributes and characteristics. And obviously, as you will go deeper, you will see which attributes and characteristics. So the Imams have many attributes. The Imams were generous. Considering them generous, was it considered ghuluw? So this is what he's trying to say, is that a lot of the beliefs which are central today, if you go far back in history, closer to the time of the Imams, you will be shocked to see that while today these beliefs are revered, they are respected, in the time of the Imams, these beliefs are considered to be kufr. They're considered to be ghuluw. They're considered to be shirk. They're considered to be outright deviation and blasphemy during the time of the Imams and closer to their times. But in our times, they're not considered to be blasphemy. He's saying, yu'addul yawm min daruriyat al-madhab. Today, this is considered to be the pillar of Shiaism. You see? So, for example, this incident that I just mentioned in front of you, Syed Ali al-Alawi, from the biography of Ayyatullah Sayyid Shahabuddin Marashi al-Najafi, this incident, if it were to take place during the time of the Imam, let's say someone were to say that, let us stop whatever we are doing and let us offer salah. And someone were to stop that person and say, no, this is more important. During the time of the Imam, what would this act be considered? What would the Imam himself, if he was present? I mean, I think I don't need to, if I tell you what the Imam's reaction would be, that would be kind of spoon feeding, right? When we're not here to spoon feed, we're here with critical thinkers. You can imagine yourself. This is the thing that you're told about Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Karbala is what? What is one of the very rarest and really rare moments in Karbala where you see a smile on the face of the Imam? Karbala is the day of Ashura is a very heavy day on Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. But the one time you see him smiling, according to the narrations, is when the companion comes to him and tells him what? He says, Ya Imam, I see the time for Salah. The war is going on, the battle has begun. And in the middle of the battle, in the heat of the battle, this companion comes back to Imam. He says, Ya Imam, the time for prayer has come, and it is our earnest desire. Because clearly this prayer, the way things are going, this is going to be our last prayer. And it would be our honor, it would be our greatest, desire to offer this last prayer behind the grandson of Rasulullah. That would be such a wonderful experience for all of us. Would you do us that honor? And Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is so pleased. He says, Zakarta salah. See, you mentioned salah. Ja'alaka Allah min al-musallin. Hasharaka Allah ma'al musallin. May Allah resurrect you on the day of judgment with the musallin. Imam doesn't tell him, although he could have. He doesn't tell him, Sakit Bash, shut up. We are fighting the army of Yazid. Okay. If this Yazid is allowed to go ahead with his agenda, there won't be no adhan. There won't be any adhan. There won't be any salah left. Okay. So just keep quiet and fight. This is no time for salah here. Our life is in danger. No. In the heat of that battle, Al-Imam Abu Abdullah al-Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salatu wasalam smiles. He says, Zakarta salah. Mention salah. Ja'alaka Allah, hasharaka Allah ma'al musallin. May Allah resurrect you on the day of judgment with those who are particular about their salah. So an Imam who in the heat of the battle is asking his followers, even though he knows they will be attacked and the enemies will take advantage of this. One of the companions of the Imam, Sa'id ibn Abdullah al-Hanafi, lost his life. He earned his martyrdom just, shielding the Imam from the arrows, as is mentioned in the narrations. So, during the time of the Imams, if someone attempted to do something like this, what would be the reaction of the Imam? What would be the reaction of the companions of the Imams? You see, Ayyatullah Mamkani is saying it's not just the Imams. He's saying fil ahdi sabiq, the Imams are too far back. He's saying even if you go into the not so distant part, he even quotes, for example, people like he's talking about 4th and 5th centuries, even up to 6th century he's saying. 5th century, 6th century, 5th century, 4th century, 3rd century. If you take the beliefs of today's Shia, the mainstream Shias, you take those beliefs, the core beliefs that they have about the Imams, about the attributes of the Imams. You take those beliefs and you go and present them to scholars like Sheikh al-Saduq, Sheikh al-Mufid, Sayyid Murtada, Alam al-Huda, the old school Shia scholars. Not even the Imams. The Imams, though, we will see the statements of the Imams. He's talking about Fil Ahd al-Sabiq. If you go far back in history, with some of the core beliefs that the Shias have about the Imams, he's saying you will find that the earlier scholars would have declared them to be outright heresy. For them, this would be the height of Ghuluww. This would be the height of crossing the limits, if such a phrase can exist. Height of crossing the limits. In any case. So, what do we see here? Ayyatullah Mamkani is making a very, it is a tall claim, but it is backed up by 39 volumes of research in Ilm al-Rijaal, because he keeps on repeating this, right? I mentioned to you the statement from volume 2, right? The statement that he makes in volume 3 is similar to this. He says, وَقَدْ بَيَّنَّا مِرَارًا عَدِيدَةً أَنَّهُ لا وثوق لنا برميهم رجلا بالغلو لأن ما هو الآن من الضروري عند الشيعة في مراتب الأئمة عليهم السلام كان يومئذ غلوا حتى أن مثل الصدوق رضوان الله عليه عد نفي السهو عنهم غلوا مع أن نفي السهو عنهم اليوم من ضروريات مذهبنا. So he actually goes on to give practical examples of how some of the beliefs, and inshallah throughout this series we will discuss more and more of these views that are presented by scholars and by our own reflections into the Quran, things and the original sources. Things that today are considered to be standard Shia practice or standard Orthodox Shia belief, but in the past, they were considered to be ghuluw. In the past, they were considered to be kufr. The Imams, they didn't only use the term kufr to refer to things like this, and beliefs like this, and practices like this. They use terms like ghuluw, they use terms like kufr, outright disbelief. So you think outright disbelief is when someone says Ali is God, Imam, if you come to the teaching of the Imams, they will say that Ali is God is Kabisa, that is a gone case. That is not even within the fold of Islam. We're talking about crossing the limits within the fold of Islam. So the Imams of Ahlul Bayt ﷺ, when we will return to their original, authentic, reliable, Quran-verified statements, which is what we intend to present in this series. Today, this is just the starter session. We're just getting started. Things are getting warmed up. For those of you who may be wondering, why the discussion on Ghuluww and why is it really worth discussing? Well, after Ayyatullah Mamkani's statement, you tell me yourself, can you afford to ignore this disease? Because here you were thinking that, okay, this is a disease that is affecting fringe groups. Ayyatullah Mamkani's statement, and Ayyatullah Mamkani, again, let me repeat, he is not a reformist scholar. He is a highly traditional scholar. And his views are not of the kind that you would think they are from a statement like this. No. He defends and promotes a lot of the things that he himself acknowledges in the past were considered to be ghuluw. But he says, look, this is min daruriyat al-madhhab. So what if in the time of the Imams and the scholars, if it was considered ghuluw, so what? We have to go by what it is today. Today, this is part and parcel of our identity, he says, and therefore, we have to go along with it. We have to go with the flow. That's his argument in his book. Now, I will share more if you guys are interested. But I realize I'm approaching the end of the time that has been allotted to me. So in any case, he has repeated this statement more than once in his book. And remember, after you share a statement like this with a common person at the street level, mostly the reactions you get is, that's why I belabored this point about, I mentioned so much about the biography and I mentioned the statement of his student, to give people a sense of who we're dealing with. Because, when you hear a statement like this, there are some contemporary personalities, some speakers whom I'm told have made similar statements. when they made similar statements, I guess they were not Ayatullahs or they were not very high level, or, Maraji or something like that. People made a huge controversy. And they were like, this is a Wahhabi agent, or he is a, I don't know, agent of CIA, Mossad, all these intelligence agencies, their names start coming up. So that's why when I shared this statement, I shared with you, the statement is very small, but the background was very long. Why? Because when you share this statement, you have to make this background clear, make people understand that this is not a Wahhabi scholar that we're talking about. This is not a Saudi scholar. Ayyatullah Mamkani was born in Najaf in 1290 AH, and he died in Najaf. Okay? So unless you want to say that Mossad and Israel or, I don't know, CIA have opened up a base in Najaf, and they're operating from there, and they had opened it up back in the 1290s when they didn't even exist, because the CIA came into existence when? Edgar Hoover, around the 50s, I think. Yeah, but in any case, when you share these kinds of statements with people who are not well read in the sources, they will immediately, their first reaction is denial. They say no. No, sorry. Denial is when you bring out the book and you read, you show them the statement. See, it says Ayyatullah Sheikh Abdullah Mamkani. This is what Ayyatullah Seetani's teacher has said about him. This is what Ayyatullah Marashi Najafi has said about him. This is what so you show, once basically you've established that this is not some Wahhabi scholar, this is as Shia a scholar as you will get. And he is not even a reformist Shia. He's a super traditional Shia scholar. Once they are convinced, then their reaction, their first reaction is denial. But once you corner them and you show them the statement, then they go from denial to character assassination. They're like, okay, if it is established that he said this, then he must be a liar, he must be an agent, he must be, mashallah, the labels. Even the scholars of Rijaal don't have as many labels to discredit dubious and shady characters who transmit religion as our common people have, mashallah, when it comes to labeling scholars. So Ayyatullah Sheikh Abdullah Mamkani, the important thing to remember, is a traditional scholar. He's a traditional mainstream Shia scholar. He's the teacher of mainstream, highly popular scholars. And he's telling you, Baba, even I myself support much of what's going on. He's against reform. He does not want any reform, at least not in the field of Ghuluww. But he's saying, yes, if you ask me, research 39 volumes, yes, the 39 volumes, when you study the biographies of the companions of the Imams, the students of the companions of the Imams themselves, their statements, yes, prepare to be shocked. Prepare to find statements from the Imams and their students and the students of their students and the students of the students of their students, outright declaring things that you consider to be holy and sacred parts of Shiaism today. You will see them saying that this is ghuluw, this is kufr, this is shirk, this is deviation. So brothers and sisters, we are in front of a huge problem here. Then we have these high-level scholars, traditional scholars, they're telling us that they're saying, Houston, we have a problem, or rather Qum or Najaf, we have a problem. That the madhab that people are following today, they don't even realize, they think that the madhab that they have received, which we call the madhab of Ahlul Bayt, is exactly the way it was when the Ahlul Bayt left them. But the reality is, it's not only poles apart, it is complete. Yani it's the difference between what the Ahlul Bayt, the teachings that Ahlul Bayt left behind, and what is commonly being practiced in the name of Ahlul Bayt and in the name of love for Ahlul Bayt. As I showed you this example that Ayyatullah Syed Ali Hur gave of his teacher, what is the heading of the chapter in the hagiography? This chapter is not entitled Inhiraful Ulama an Masar al-Husayn, the deviation of some of our scholars, unfortunately, from the path and teachings of Abdullah al-Husayn. No. As Ayyatullah Sheikh Adil al-Alawi is mentioning this in the Fada'il. This is Fadila, and he's saying this is not, he's not condemning or criticizing or even expressing slight disapproval, no. Because as soon as he finishes narrating this incident, he says, Ajal i'tiqadu, he says, yes, this is the way this is supposed to be. This is how things are supposed to be. So these scholars, on the one hand, they do acknowledge that what is happening today is very different from what was the status quo during the time of the Imams. But on the other hand, when it comes to saying that, okay, so why don't we go back to the times of the Imams. Why don't we try to return back to those original teachings? That is much more, that's easier said than done. That is an uphill climb, and inshallah, that is something, those of you who are interested, we will go as deep as you want to. There is an ocean, literally an ocean to cover. And that is why, yeah, to be honest, when you're confronted with a topic like this, you don't know where to start and where to end. Inshallah, in the next lecture, we're going to start by giving you definitions. First of all, let's understand what is this ghuluw. How did the Quran, Allah has defined ghuluw in the Quran, by the way. He has talked about ghuluw. He has given examples of it. The Imams have defined ghuluw very clearly. They've given examples of it. The scholars have talked about it. There's a lot of material on this because this is a very high level. This is like third stage terminal cancer. So there's a lot of research on this that inshallah we will share with you if you stay with us throughout the series. Inshallah we'll explore more and more. For now, admin, how much time do we have left? I was told 10 minutes.
Syed,
should we conclude?
Yes. Can we ask you how much time you have to answer questions so that we can plan it that way?
Okay, so there are requests to share the email. Yeah, inshallah, don't worry about it. There is a WhatsApp group, I'm told.
Yes.
There's a WhatsApp group. The admin and all the people that you want to contact are available on that WhatsApp group. You can add all the members who have attended tonight's lecture to that WhatsApp group. Ultimately, much of the the physical stuff, the transcripts, scripts, and notes, and even the evidences I will be sharing because I mainly have my stuff in old-fashioned book format. So, but I will try to be sharing more of that. Inshallah, I envisage two series. One is for those people who really want Hausa level lectures, whereby we actually open books and explain terminology, go very super deep. So yeah, we can have an online Hausa. There obviously we'll be sharing more materials. And then there are some people, average people who are like, you know what, I don't want to go that deep. Just tell me as much as is enough to save me and guarantee me salvation in the hereafter. Because remember, ghuluw, according to the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, there are many things where shafa'ah can help you. Ghuluw is one area where they say Allah has sealed the door for shafa'ah. There is no shafa'ah going to be accepted. Anyone who falls into any kind of ghuluw, the Imams have disassociated themselves from this. If you fall into this, we don't know you, we don't recognize you, we repudiate you and renounce any association with you on the day of judgment. So if you're a true follower of the Imam, this is third stage terminal cancer. You will need to read up on this. You need to listen to as many. Don't listen to, yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say just go by one researcher or one speaker, one scholar. Be indiscriminate, okay? Listen to everyone, but apply your intellect and apply the critical thinking skills that Allah has given you. And inshallah, you will discover a lot. And you will remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. It is an uphill task. When I discuss this with scholars, they tell me that this is an impossible mission. It is mission impossible, rescuing people from, because you see, if it was one or two things, or if it was only such obvious things like this example that I shared, if it was just this, if this was the only ghuluw that was going on, people are giving precedence to Azah over Salah, then that would not be a very big deal. We could bring, there are so many fatwa from the Maraji that we can bring in, basically silence this whole discussion. But the problem is, as Ayyatullah Mamkani is saying, right, yeah. So as Ayyatullah Mamkani is saying, it's not just one or two. He says basically your whole imamology, okay? All your beliefs about the Imams. Let's say you have 10 beliefs about the Imams, right? And let me clarify something. So he's saying fi awsaf al-a'imma, the attributes and qualities and characteristics of the Imams. So I mentioned this, I didn't complete this point. What attributes of Imams? So there are many things that the followers of Ahlul Bayt believe about Imams. For example, we believe that they were the most learned personalities after Rasulullah. Is this ghuluw? That can be a question, because Ayyatullah Mamkani is saying that majority of our core beliefs about the Imams were considered in the time of the Imams, they were considered to be ghuluw. So suppose I was living in the time of the Imam and I went to the Imam and I said, yeah, Imam, I believe you are the most learned after Rasulullah. I have not seen anyone else more learned than you. Would the Imam look at me and say, that is ghuluw? No. You know why? Because we actually have statements from the Imam saying things equivalent to this. That they were not people, they were not boastful people, so they don't put it like that, but they give indications that, look, if you want the purest source back to Rasulullah, there's no denying and no disputing the fact that you can't get a more clear channel to Rasulullah. That's why even Sunni scholars of Hadith, like Al-Imam Jalaluddin Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr as-Suyuti, in his Alfiyatul Hadith, which is a textbook that's taught in Al-Azhar, an advanced level textbook of Hadith. He has summed up the entire science of Sunni Hadith in over 1,000 lines of poetry. Yeah, scholars in the past used to like to do that. To make things easy for students to memorize, they would compile it and compose it in the form of poetry, and then people would memorize it. So in his Alfiyatul Hadith, Al-Imam Suyuti, the Sunni scholar, he says that if you want the most authentic chain that goes back to Rasulullah, he says, وَأَهْلُ بَيْتِ الْمُصْطَفَى جَعْفَرٌ عَنْ آبَائِهِ إِنْ عَنْهُ رَاوٍ مَا وَهَنْ. He says the clearest, the most authentic and reliable chain of the Ahlul Bayt that goes to Rasulullah is the one that goes through Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, an aba'ihi, through his pious forefathers, all the way to Rasulullah. He says you cannot find a more pure and a more beautiful and clear chain that goes back to Rasulullah than this particular chain as far as the Ahlul Bayt are concerned. Among all the chains of the Ahlul Bayt, this is the strongest and the most reliable chain. So yes, definitely, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt were repositories of prophetic knowledge, of Quranic knowledge. So if you believe that they are knowledgeable, that is not ghuluw. That's why Ayyatullah Mamkani does not mean to imply that. Because he doesn't say, وَأَنَّ كُلَّ مَا يَعْتَقِدُهُ أَوْ مَا يُعَدُّ الْيَوْمِ مِنْ ضَرُورِيَاتِ الْمَثَلِ. He doesn't say every belief the Shia have about the Imams is false and is wrong. And no. He says, وَأَنَّ أَكْثَرَ. According to his research, أَكْثَر, majority. So now majority, we'll have to read these 39 volumes to find out how much, to take out the percentage. No one has taken out the percentage. The majority can be any place. Akthar in Arabic can be anything from 51%. It can't be 50. Because 50-50, then you can't say akthar. Okay? But if it's 51, between 51 to 99%, he's saying anywhere between 51 to 99% of the beliefs, the unique beliefs of the Shia regarding the Imams, particularly their awsaf. And as you will see in the course of the coming lectures, these are mainly supernatural, superhuman attributions. The supernatural claims that have been made about the Imams. This is what he's referring to, and this is what we will also be talking about and investigating in depth in light of the Quran, as well as the original, authentic, Quran-verified statements of the Imams of the Prophet. So I just wanted to clarify that. He's not saying all your beliefs are wrong. We have the Shias believe in many attributes of Imams. They were generous people in their lifetime. They used to help the poor. That is not ghuluw. They believed that they were very knowledgeable. They were repositories of prophetic knowledge. They were very well versed and learned in the Quran. They were very kind-hearted people. They were very particular about salah. They were extremely devoted to God. They had lost themselves in the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of these attributes and characteristics, Ayyatullah Mamkani has no issue. He is not counting them. This is the reason why scholars, when they speak, they have to be very careful. They cannot make exaggerated claims. Otherwise, their own fellow scholars would catch them. So Ayyatullah Sheikh Marashi Najafi had said, for example, Ghulluww, all of the beliefs, and probably his own student, Ayyatullah Syed Ali Hur, and we have seen this a lot. Many times, scholars sometimes, they make statements that are symbolic. Their students immediately catch them and say, no, how can you say this, ya Ustad? They have debates and discussions, and finally the Ustad, he agrees with the student. We've seen this a lot in the case of Ayyatullah Syed Ali Hur Kamoonpuri. There were many statements that Ayyatullah Syed Ali Hur Kamoonpuri made that he took back, he retracted and withdrew after his students challenged him. So that's why when scholars scholars are writing for scholarly purposes in front of a scholarly audience, they're very careful because they know that they cannot get away with claims that are inaccurate. So that's why Ayyatullah Mamkani does not say all the beliefs. Rather, he says majority of the beliefs that are considered to be core and central and absolutely fundamental, rudimentary, or rather essential to our understanding of the Imams and what we believe about the Imams. He's saying majority of that. If you go far back in history, you go closer to the time of the Imams, and in fact, he doesn't say this, but I can add, if you go into the world of the Quran, so the time when the Quran was being revealed, these beliefs would be considered complete blasphemy. They would be considered to be outright kufr and shirk, as Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, when he looks at some of the claims that are attributed to his pious ancestors or his pious forefathers, like Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he looks at those statements and he says, this is pure kufr and shirk and ghuluw. And the companion says, but these are the trusted companions of your forefathers are narrating them. He says, yes, unfortunately, the hadith transmission was compromised. That is a long story and a long discussion, inshallah. We will bring that up as well in the coming series of lectures. For now, my time is over, and I'm supposed to hand it over to the admin and the moderator, Al-Hajj Samir Bhai, to allow for questions. For questions and answers, I would request, please keep them focused. We want to go step by step. I had so much, as you would have seen in the poster and in the flyer, there's so much stuff to cover. I have barely scratched the surface. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Reason is we want to go slowly. There's no hurry. This is a very insidious and deeply rooted disease. It needs to be studied very carefully, very reflectively, very calmly, very coolly, and in light of the guidance of the Quran and the original authentic teachings of the Imams. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
Thank you, Sheikh. As for questions, if you have a question, you can raise your hand or you can write it in the chat box, and we will give those questions to Syed, and if they are here and now, then he can answer a few. So the floor is open to all of you. Yes, you can ask, you can unmute yourself and ask. AP.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, Sheikh, for this introductory session. I just had a question I wanted to ask. Are there any scholars which are considered mainstream that agree with such views which you're saying that are extreme?
Are there other scholars who agree with this?
Yani agree not with that they're Ghuluww, but agree that they are yani the Imams did have such powers or such attributes, and present any proof except for apart from the scholar that you mentioned today, of Ayyatullah Marashi Najafi. Are there any other scholars that we know of today that also agree with these supernatural attributes of the Aimma alayhim salam?
I think Ayyatullah Mamkani has answered your question. He says, أَنَّ أَكْثَرَ مَا يُعَدُّ الْيَوْمِ. He's talking about today. He's saying today, if something is considered to be, or rather, what is considered to be central to the beliefs of the Shia about the Imams, in the past, it was considered to be Ghuluww. So he's saying today it is considered central. By whom is it considered central? By the scholarly establishment and by their followers. And he is himself part of that establishment, and he is among those scholars as well.
I see.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, are there any scholars today that openly say against, to the public at least, that these such attributes are not actually part of the Imam's teachings or the Holy Prophet's teachings?
Yes, so those are the reformist scholars. You have scholars like, for example, Ayatullah Sayyid Kamal al-Haydari. He has spoken a lot about this, and he has basically become public enemy #1 for a lot of people because of his comments about this. You have Ayatullah Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Fadlullah before him, who spoke very openly about certain issues concerning Ghuluww. You also have, for example, Ayatullah Shia Abdullah, is the student of Ayatullah Sayyid Mahmud al-Hashimi al-Shahrudi, who was himself the student of Ayatullah Sayyid Shaheed Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr. So yeah, you have a body of scholarship, and you have a group of scholars who have written and spoken quite extensively about this. And there is a long list actually, but they are not the ones that you hear. Their views have been marginalized. So nowadays in our communities, you wouldn't hear much about their views because somehow they're regarded as being maybe non-mainstream or unorthodox. So that's why their views are not very, and that's why, yeah, this series is also important from this perspective, is that you've grown up, you and I have grown up listening to the traditional mainstream perspective. But now what this series and series like this will do is expose you more and more to the views of those scholars, those scholarly voices which have been largely suppressed. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Sheikh. We have 3 other questions. There's 2 questions that can be put into one. I will read them both, but I think they will have the same answer. It says, Salam Sheikh, how are such great scholars with so much knowledge of the history and Quran and also agree to so much distortion, but yet did nothing to reform the belief system? That's question number 1. The follow-up question, the second question was, it says here, Salam Sayyid, thank you so much for the intro, very insightful. My question is, you said, this is as serious as 3rd stage terminal cancer. Why is it that this is not addressed from the minbar as frequently or among mainstream scholarship? Why is it that most of the lay people have continued with our beliefs like business as usual without alarms being raised? Over to you.
Okay, so to start with the question of Brother Murtaza, Salam Sayyid, how are such great scholars with so much knowledge of the history and Quran and also agree to so much distortion, but yet did nothing to reform the belief system? So this is, I think, a very popular question. We get that a lot from our students and also our friends. And it requires a separate lecture, inshallah, to answer. What is the scholarly establishment doing about this? Okay. So as I mentioned, there are some scholars who have spoken out against this. Some scholars have spoken very vehemently. And yeah, so like Ayatullah Sayyid Kamal al-Haydari, who has been teaching in the Hawza in Iran, in Qom, for the last, I think, 35 years or so. Or 25 was the last time I checked. Probably 30 now. And he's a marja, mujtahid, marja taqleed, has risala amaliya, and he has this whole okay, so there are more questions that keep coming up and that kind of distracts you. But in any case, yeah. So what I was saying is that wow, when it rains it pours. I can see so many more questions coming up. Right. Okay. So yeah, inshallah, we will address as many questions as we can tonight. But as far as the question of scholars is concerned, Ayatullah Sayyid Kamal al-Haydari is one of those scholars who has really done a great job. He lives inside, he's in Iran, right? And he repeatedly complains about what he calls khutut hamra. So he has raised the alarm, and he has mainly focused on the concept of, or the notion of hadith fabrication. So you see all those scholars who defend and justify Ghuluww, what is their basis? What is their argument? They say, look, we're not telling you stuff from our pocket, okay? I have with me here the book of the Imam, okay? These are the narrations of the Imams. This is the collection. in this collection, it is mentioned that Imam said so and so. What do you want me to do? Ar-raddu ala al-Imam, you want me to tell him, sorry, this belief of yours is, too intense, and I reject it. I can't do that. That's what the traditional scholars say. So the reformist scholars, they respond by saying, "Listen, Baba, have you read the same books that we have read? Come, we show you." So, and this is the problem. Many of the scholars who are going on as if business is, as with businesses, as if everything is hunky-dory, they haven't really studied in depth. So inshallah, when I will share with you the narrations from our oldest and most authoritative sources of ilm al-Rijaal, like for example, Rijaal al-Kashi, okay? When you will see the narrations of the Imams, that is when you will realize how dangerous this is, and you will realize the enormity of the deviation that has taken place. And that is when you will realize how serious this is as a problem, okay? So these reformist scholars have discovered these crucial pieces of evidence, but not every scholar has, because these pieces of evidence, they're not lying there on the first page of every book. They are buried in multi-volume encyclopedias of hadith and Rijaal and fiqh and usul. So you have to go through those to discover all of this. Although my argument is, unfortunately, I also had to learn all of this the hard way. I had to go really deep into the sources to get a sense of what's going on. But the reality is, I now realize I didn't have to do all of that. And that's why I don't want to complicate things. I don't want to go too deep into those things. Part of me does not want to, part of me wants to. The part of me that wants to because people, they value scholarly statements more. That's the sad reality. They value the scholarly statements more than Allah's direct and explicit statements in the Quran. Otherwise, my argument and my contention is that if you just read the Quran sincerely, removing the blinkers of sectarian brainwashing and what you've been fed with from your childhood, you read the Quran, you go by the obvious of what it is saying, that is sufficient. That's why the title of this particular series is Dispelling the Darkness of Ghuluww with the Light of the Quran. But obviously, I am forced to bring more scholarly opinions because people value those more apparently. Generally speaking, my experience has been that. I could be wrong for this group, and inshallah I'm wrong when it comes to this group. But with many other groups, many of my other students, you tell them, Qala Allah, okay, if you were to present the statement of Ayyatullah Mamkani, for example, from the Quran, you were to justify it. And you were to show them, see, this is the Islam of the Quran, and this is what is happening here. The Islam of the Quran is saying, Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. Okay? That salah is not an obligation that we have made wajib on you to fulfill whenever you feel the mood for doing so. Rather, salah is, if you are a mu'min, if you are among the mu'mineen, among the believers, salat is wajib on you, kitaban mawquta, with the right times. Salah is a time-sensitive obligation. That is why Imam Hussein alayhi salam stopped his jihad in Karbala and offered the salah. That's why Imam Ali alayhi salam stopped the jihad in Siffin and offered the salah. It's a time-sensitive obligation. This is where in the Islam of the Quran. But now, when you bring the Islam of the what's going on in the holy places, for example, that is different from the Islam of the Quran, right? But if you just show people that this is what the Quran is saying, this is what the people are doing, they're like, they have this complex, this syndrome, whereby they think that, these people probably know the Quran more than us, the scholars. Therefore, if you show us the Quran, they don't take it that seriously. Rather, when you bring the statement of a scholar, that somehow has more value for them, which is sad. And personally, I would prefer to keep the discussion centered around the Quran, because that is the approach that the Imams, they did not say that when you are confronted by the Ghulaat, when you're confronted by Ghuluww, go rushing to those of our companions who are the real scholars and protectors of our knowledge. No, because the Imams, they could not even trust some of their close companions. Some of their most trusted agents betrayed them. And if you want names, we can name names. There was a whole sect of the Waqifiyyah. They were hand-picked agents of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim alayhi salam, who after Imam al-Kadhim left this world for money, they actually lied about Imam al-Kadhim and they said that he's actually not dead, he has gone into ghaiba. And when Imam al-Rida alayhi salam asked them to surrender the funds that they had collected in his name, they said, no, how can we surrender the funds to you? Your father is still alive. And Imam al-Rida alayhi salam is saying, my father passed away. We buried, well, Imam was not there, but the mu'mineen were there. They attended his burial, okay? And his mirath has been distributed. You think we would distribute the mirath of our father while he's still alive? And the companions are saying, no, actually you're mistaken. He's actually alive, he's in ghaiba. And he is in touch with us and he has asked us to continue collecting the funds in his name. And finally, when the Imam assembles the mutawatir proof, you know, all the other eyewitnesses, and they're cornered, then, you know, they change their story and they say, actually, okay, if your father has actually died, as these people are saying, in that case, your father did not leave us with any instructions to surrender anything to you. So we don't know you. And, you know, they took another of the minor sons of Imam al-Kadhim and they made him the Imam so that they could exploit him. And they told the people, Imam al-Kadhim has called him, has named this minor son of his the Imam. So, and we are his agents because he's too young to be Imam, right? So we will keep on surrendering the funds to us in his name, and we will. And who are these scholars, by the way? These are not street level people we are talking about. The Waqifiyyah, the leaders of this sect, these companions of the Imams that we're talking about, these are the highest level scholars. To this very day, scholars and Maraji like Ayyatullah Syed Seetani and Ayyatullah Syed Ali Hur Kamoonpuri, when you open their books of fiqh, you will see they rely on the narrations of these people, like Ali ibn Abi Hamza al-Bata'ini, who was outright, the Imam invoked the malediction of Allah on him, Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. But Ali ibn Abi Hamza al-Bata'ini, because he was such a knowledgeable, learned person, he knew so much of the ulum of the Al-Muhammad, that even though he was discredited and labeled as a deviant and as someone who betrayed the Imam, still his knowledge was so much that people continued to take his narrations in fiqh. To this day, even scholars of the level of Syed Ali Hur Kamoonpuri, sometimes they rely on his narrations, and when people object, they say, no, we're not taking we're only taking those of his narrations which are, you know, okay, which have nothing to do with his betrayal of the Imam. So he lied in one area, he didn't lie in the other areas. So they don't discredit him completely. But basically what I'm telling you is that the Imams could not even trust their own companions. They didn't know. For all they knew, a companion could turn against them. So that's why they never told their companions that when you are in doubt, or when you have Ghuluww, this is not Ghuluww, you go to the scholars of our companions. They will tell you what to know. They said, اعرضوا كلامنا على كلام ربنا. Any claim that is brought to you about us, take it back to the book of Allah. فما وجدتم له شاهدا أو شاهدين من كتاب الله فخذوه. Whatever you find evidence, confirmation, corroboration for in the Quran, accept it. But for whatever any claim about us for which you don't see explicit testimonies of Allah in the Quran confirming that, reject them without blinking an eye. It is not from us. So that is the approach. The approach that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt preached in order for us to protect ourselves from Ghuluww was a highly Quran-centered approach. Not a Rijaal or not a scholar-centered approach.
Thank you for that. I think that was very, very apt. There is a question at the bottom, which is, if you can read it, you will realize that that is very contradictory to your ground rules in the initial part. So if you can just clarify that again, please, for the person who's asked the question.
Okay. So we're done answering the question by Brother Murtaza. And we have a question by Brother.
I just want to click on the last question that's there, and then we can go back to Sister Khadija's question.
Okay, so the last question is, you mentioned that...
It says, you mentioned that Ayyatullah Mamkani was a teacher of Ayyatullah Sistani. So I know that's...
No. Yeah, that is not correct. Ayyatullah Mamkani is not a teacher of Ayyatullah Sistani. Ayyatullah Mamkani, I said, is a teacher of Ayyatullah Marashi and Najafi. Okay. Ayyatullah Seetani had one of his teachers called Ayyatullah Sheikh Agha Khui, who is the author of another encyclopedia entitled Ad-Dari'a ila Tasanif Shia. It is an encyclopedia about Shia writings and Shia works. So Ayyatullah Agha Khui in this encyclopedia entitled Ad-Dari'a ila Tasanif Shia praises, he's full of praises for Ayyatullah al-Mamkani. So I mentioned that to show you that Ayyatullah Mamkani is not he's not a reformist or outlandish scholar. He's well respected among the traditional scholars because he is himself one of them. So that's why the traditional scholars love him, they like him, they respect him, and they revere him. And this is a statement that he has presented. This is his research. He's mentioned it in the Fawaid after spending years in study of Rijaal and studying the life of the lives and the beliefs. Because when you study Ilm al-Rijaal, you find out, you study each and every single narrator. What does he believe? It's very important to find out what the narrator believes. How else will you know whether he's a Ghali or not, whether he's a Waqifi or not, whether there are so many deviant sub-Shia deviant sects. You have the Fathiyya, and you have the Waqifiyyah, and you have the Nusayriyya, you have the Zaydiyya and the Jarudiyya and the Batriyya, and God knows how many subsects you have. So that is why you have to be careful. So you mentioned Ayyatullah Mamkani was a teacher of Seetani. No, he has been praised by the teacher of Ayyatullah Seetani. As well as you mentioned that Ayyatullah Khui had taken some of his views back after debating with his students. Yes, this fact is mentioned by Ayyatullah Sheikh Muslim ad-Dawri in his book Kulliyat fi Ilm al-Rijaal or Buhuth fi Ilm al-Rijaal. He mentions this very clearly. And also Ayyatullah Sheikh Muhammad Asif al-Muhsini in his textbooks on Ilm al-Rijaal, he mentions some of the views that Ayyatullah Khui went back on after his students debated with him, and that's a good thing. It is an arrogant teacher who, when the students come up to him and tell them that no, here your evidence is weak or this claim of yours is not supported by evidence, it would be an arrogant of a teacher to just insist and say that I'm right because I'm the teacher and you are wrong because you are the student. Ayyatullah Khui was not like that. When his students pointed out his mistakes to him, so Ayyatullah Sheikh Muslim ad-Dawri does mention that he gave them a tough time. So he says, Raja'nahu miraran. We had to go back to him again and again and put a lot of pressure on him. And I guess we have to cut him some slack in this case because you see, this particular claim, it was the claim about the mass authentication of, okay, this is going to sound like an advanced level browser lecture, but very simply, the claim about the mass authentication of the narrators of Kamilu Ziyarat, which is a book you probably must have heard of. So Ayyatullah Khui, based on the statement that was made by Abu Ja'far ibn Qawlaway at the beginning of this book, he made a blanket mass authentication of all the narrators in Kamilu Ziyarat. And he said that anyone who appears in the chains of Kamilu Ziyarat, even if he has not received authentication anywhere else, on the basis of Abu Ja'far ibn Qawlaway's mass authentication, we can regard all the narrators as authentic. Now, this seems to you like a small statement, but once you accept this, there are thousands of da'if narrations that become sahih. Because you are accepting whose testimony? Abu Ja'far ibn Qawlaway's, who, as you will find out later on, was himself heavily influenced by the movement of the Ghulaat. And who exposed this for us? Ayyatullah Syed Ali Hur Kamoonpuri in his lectures entitled Qa'idat la darar wa la dirar, which are actually transcripts of his advanced level Ilm al-Usul lectures. He mentions very clearly, he says, our Ustad was dead wrong. Our Ustad Syed Khui, this opinion of his is completely wrong. فَإِنَّ فِيهِ, because definitely in Kamilu Ziyarat, مَنْ لَا شُبْهَةَ فِي ضُعْفِهِ وَكَذِبِهِ. Sayyidina al-Ustad was saying that all the narrators of this book are reliable based on the testimony of Abu Ja'far ibn Qawlaway at the beginning. He's saying the reality is when we did research, we found out that there are narrators in this book for whom there is not a shadow of doubt. La shubhata, there cannot be even something that resembles a doubt that they were outright liars and weak narrators who are not to be relied on and not to be trusted. So But this was, you see, thousands of narrations had become sahih because of this claim by Sayyid al-Khui. So Ayatollah Muslim al-Dawari says, when we went to him and we said, Sayyidina al-Ustad, you have made a mistake here. You have misinterpreted the statement of Ibn Ghuluww. That's not what he's saying. He's referring to his immediate mashayikh. He's not referring to the whole chain going back to the Imam. Sayyid al-Khui in the beginning was like, no, I think he's referring to the whole chain. They had debates, discussions back and forth. Finally, when they presented him with irrefutable, incontrovertible, indisputable evidence, proving, as Ayyatullah Sistani says, that without a shadow of doubt, that this book is full of liars and weak narrators and all kinds of dodgy, shady, and really duplicitous characters in it. That's when Ayyatullah Khui, towards the very end of his life, he went back and he issued a fatwa saying, okay, I take back this statement of mine, and this statement was published and it was circulated among the house of scholars. Yeah, but the important thing is that Ayyatullah Khui took back his views after debating with the students. So wasn't this the case with Ayyatullah Mamkani? As Ayyatullah Sistani being one of his students, so does he agree with his teacher's view or has a different view? And if he had, then did he debate with his teacher, present his views? Okay, so I think this question I explained to you. Ayyatullah Sistani is not a student of Ayyatullah Mamkani. He's a student of Ayyatullah Buzurg al-Tahrani.
All right. So final question we'll take for tonight is from Khadija Zaid Rashid. Can I read it for you or will you read it?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I have it here in front of me. Salams, please could you shed some light on factors in more recent Islamic history that have allowed for a degree of ghuluw in a religion that prides itself on academic tradition and being in compliance with the science and sense? Okay, yes, this is a very good question that will become more clear, inshallah. There's a lot that can be said, explain the factors that have facilitated and basically aided the rise in the tide of ghuluw in a religion that prides itself on an academic tradition. Yeah, it used to. I don't know about now. We're heading in the direction of more emotional. We are becoming more and more emotional and less academic, as is being observed. But yeah, inshallah, some of the questions I want to come back to that question. I noticed it's a very good question by brother Maisam. Salam Sayyid, thank you so much for the info. You're welcome. Very insightful. My question is, as you said, this is as serious. Is brother Maisam there, or has he left us?
Yes, I'm still here. Thank you.
Oh, he's still here. Okay, good, great. So you have asked a very good question. I like your question. He says, my question is, as you said, this is as serious as third stage terminal cancer. Why is it that this is not addressed from the mimbar as frequently or among the mainstream scholarship? Why is it that most of us lay people have continued with our beliefs like business as usual without the alarms being raised? So inshallah, if you stay tuned with us in the coming lectures, this question will be cogently and coherently answered, inshallah. You will understand 100%. First of all, you will understand that when we say it is third stage terminal cancer, I think by the time I'm done with this series, you will actually be, as you know, as Sayyid Khui's students, they put pressure on him, take back your statement. I think many of you would put pressure on me to take back my statement that it's third stage terminal cancer, not on grounds that it is inaccurate, but on grounds that it is an understatement. Yeah, because when you go through the evidence, when I will present before you the statements of the Imams themselves and the commentaries of the scholars, our top scholars, about the statements of those Imams, you will see for yourself that what we're dealing with is not something that is light. Inshallah, I think, please remind me of this, moderator. I want to start my next lecture, whenever it is next week, I think it will be. Yeah, we will start by addressing this issue. Is this really such a big deal? Because to be honest, I have a very busy schedule, and I would not, if this topic was anything less than third stage cancer, if it was maybe a benign form of cancer, I would respectfully tell the people who have been repeatedly requesting for these lectures, I would tell them, you know what, inshallah, maybe sometime in the future, but right now I have a lot of stuff on my plate, and so I would rather you excuse me. But this is basically heaven and hell, as you will see. This is not something you can afford to take lightly. It is something, inshallah, next lecture you will see. We will show why this is so serious, why you should take it so seriously, why this can completely destroy and ruin your akhirah, why this is such a dangerous and deadly tool that Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam is going out of the way to tell the parents and the elders. Do we have parents and elders here not on this group? If we have them, they need to listen to this carefully. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam issued repeated appeals to the parents, telling them, "Ihzaru ala shababikum al-ghulata la yufsiduhum." He says, please take care of your children, protect and be aware, be on high alert as far as your children are concerned when it comes to ghuluw. Because la yufsiduhum, do not allow ghuluw and the Ghulaat to corrupt your children. Because فَإِنَّ الْغُلَاةَ شَرُّ خَلْقِ اللَّهِ. Because the Ghulaat are not ordinary criminals. They're not ordinary sinners. They are the worst of Allah's creations. As Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says in the narration that Sheikh Muhammad ibn Hassan Abu Ja'far al-Tusi mentions in his Amali, which are his dictations of hadith that he used to give to his students. He mentions this. So, in any case, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi are very clear. They have warned the parents, and they would not have warned the parents, and they wouldn't have referred to people with these beliefs as the worst of God's creations if this belief was anything, or if these types of beliefs were anything less than third stage terminal cancer. And I also have other reasons for this analogy. One of the things about third stage terminal cancer is that it is incurable. And in most cases that I have seen, it proves to be incurable. Once this is a disease, that's why prevention is always better than cure. Once people fall into this, the trap is it's designed by Shaitan in such a way, and it exploits this, the Achilles heel in every lover of Ahlul Bayt. What is your biggest, what's your biggest thing? Love for Ahlul Bayt. Shaitan says, I will use this very same love of Ahlul Bayt to drive you away from the path of Ahlul Bayt. So inshallah and masha'Allah, you will do things that would make the Ahlul Bayt really sad and upset, while the chapter will carry the title of Hubbul Husayni Ajannani. In your junoon and in your madness for the love of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn, I will make you do things that Abu Abdullah al-Husayn himself would have condemned you for, would have repudiated you. And on the day of judgment, when you meet him, make no mistake about it. If these are the kinds of things that you have been doing in your life, and if this is the kind of the method you are practicing your religion, make no mistake about it. I will share with you the exact words of the Imams that make it clear that the Imams say on the day of judgment, "Bari'na minhum, laysu minna wa lasna minhum." On the day of judgment, we will refuse to even look at such people. We will disassociate from such people. In fact, these people hope for shafa'ah, right? They don't know what they have coming. The Imams are saying you're looking for shafa'ah. We are promising you the reverse of shafa'ah. So we will actually be your prosecutors in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, begging and pleading with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, Ya Allah, do not forgive these people. These people destroyed our teachings. These people destroyed our mission. They succeeded where our enemies failed. Because our enemies, they came out against us openly and they got exposed. And so people they were precautious. These Ghulaat, they came dressed as wolves in sheep's clothing. They came dressed as our lovers, and in the name of love for us, they destroyed the most central teachings and the most central part of our mission, which was devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and making your life revolve around the devotion and worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Thank you very much for that, Syed. Are there any questions that are remaining? We can take one more question, and then we will have a poll, which we would appreciate you just doing a tick for us. Any questions? You can raise your hand or you can write it in the chat box.
So I see, mashallah, so far, we're getting some really nice questions, mashallah. Alhamdulillah for the existence of such critical thinkers and mashallah. So here we have a question from, I think it's a sister, who is saying, thank you so much. This has been a very refreshing and enlightening lecture. So good to know these kinds of open and evidence-based talks are being discussed. I really like the idea of making the talks more Quran-centric. It seems it would be easier to start with a clean slate and add on what is important. God bless. Okay, so yeah, actually, this is what I also prefer. Okay, are we still there? Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, they can hear me. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that this is also my preference. Actually, there are many ways to skin Ghuluww. One is I think for lay people, the best way is the Quran way, because this is what ultimately, the advantage with the Quranic method is this is what the Ahlul Bayt recommended. I can bring you the statements of scholars. I can go deep into the ilm al-Rijaal, ilm al-Usul, share with you a lot of the stuff that high-level scholars teach in their classes. That will definitely, inshallah, even in this Quran-centered series, I'm going to bring some of those statements. Some of those statements are actually quite useful. So I'm going to be bringing those. But yes, if you see me go too deep into the scholarly, because see, most of I end up, most of my students, they're of the type who, they have the Hausa bent of mind, Hausawi bent of mind. So they are like, Quran and all of that, okay, interpretation, this, that. Show us what scholars have said. Show us, show us even narrations of Imams, they're more interested. If you show them narrations of Imams and you can authenticate the chains, they somehow find that more interesting. They find that more convincing, I think. Because we have this complex, we have this thing that has been fed to us. The Quran is this book, okay, that you cannot understand. You, the layperson, cannot understand it. You don't know the correct interpretation. It is not meant for you. It is only meant for the scholars, stuff like that. People have been fed. And as a result, when you present them Islam from the Quran, okay, they don't like, they're restless and they're not convinced. But when you present them the statements of the scholars, that is when they are, more comfortable. They feel like they're in safe hands. Somehow with the Quran, they don't feel, although Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, we can remind me of this also, moderator. We can give a whole lecture on what the Quran says about itself. Does the Quran tell you I'm a very complicated book? Do not approach me unless you are an expert, high-level scholar with multiple years behind your belt of study in the highest level seminaries? Or does the Quran address the street level kuffar and mushrikeen and say, look, I contain so much guidance that if you were to read me with an open mind, you the mushrik, you the idol worshipper, could receive enough guidance to land you straight in Jannah. Is that the narrative of the Quran? وَلَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ. O Prophet, we have revealed to you very, very, very clear manifest ayat. Is that what the Quran teaches us? Or is there a place in the Quran where Allah says, Na'udhu billah, because this is not a verse, that وَلَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ آيَاتٍ مُعَقَّدَاتٍ, that, O Prophet, we have revealed to you super complicated verses. So beware. No one should approach these verses unless he has completed n number of studies in so and so Hausa or so and so religious seminar. The Quran's verdict on this is very clear. Inshallah, we'll share that with you as well when the time comes.
Okay, thank you very much. You still have a few minutes to click on the poll if you would like. Thank you so much, Syed, for your time and for your knowledge. May the Lord increase it.
Jazakumullahu khairan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for your patience and for your interest in this topic, and also for your wonderful questions. If there are any residual questions, inshallah, we can write them down, note them down, and inshallah, we will answer them in future sessions.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. Hussein, you can close the session now, I suppose.
And regarding the WhatsApp group, I think there is a number in the poster, and also it was shared in the chat section. you can message in that number, and then we can have the special group to continue with the series. Ahsan. Shukran. Thank you, Syed.
Barakallahu feekum.
Thank you everybody for joining. Ma'as salam.